Excellent, excellent, excellent. So I think we're ready to go here for our new episode of our No Bonds Cast. My name is Ben Beck. For those of you that don't know me, I'm the co-founder and the chief investment officer of Beck Bodie. This is the second session of our Financially Fitter webinar with the great Ashley Kotler, good friend, client, former actress, fitness expert, super mom. Listen, we only have a few minutes here. I'll stop there, but next one will continue. And let's see, what have we had over the last couple of months here? So we've had some webinars on summer spending. We had a webinar on our income growth strategy. More recently, we had a great webinar with one of the founders of 401 Go, which is a really unique and great 401k platform that is specifically designed for small businesses up to 100 employees. It's really disturbing in a good way the 401k market in general and making it very, very easy for companies to not only implement but administer a great 401k platforms for their participants in their business. So great webinar. We've got another one to come. Actually, the first one ever, hard to believe we haven't done this yet, but the first one ever on the Beck Bodie growth strategy. That's coming up next week, where we'll have Matt Marizio and I think Vinny Savio on with us too from our company. So a lot of good things to come. But today we're gonna continue with our Financially Fitter webinar series. Ashley, I guess maybe it's a good idea to kind of walk us back through on how this all came to be, how we met, and what brought us to this point.
Well, with every big crazy thing I feel like that happens in your life, there's always good that comes out of it, or at least you gotta turn lemons into lemonade. And our 2020 was pretty crazy. The pandemic hit, our business was shut down, and we had our son all in the same week. And obviously when that happens, and without knowing how long our business would be shut down for, we obviously really had to take a big look at our finances,
Right.
fine tune a lot of things. And, we were like, well, let's make a move, because living in New York City, the cost of living was so high. We didn't want to just drain right through our savings. And luckily we have a savings. But, without knowing how long the pandemic was going to be happening for, obviously we wanted to plan toward the future. And so we decided to move our family across the country to cut our cost of living. And it was pretty much during that transition that, like everything else, you start talking with people. You have close friends that you trust, and a mutual friend of ours, Josh Plosker, put us in contact. And though we have had financial advisors in the past, we never really had a clear-cut game plan and a clear-cut path. And I think a lot of times what we forget about is when we start an exercise program, right, we have to do our first squat to get stronger. And it's also overwhelming to try to figure out how to do all of this on your own. So Josh had introduced us with you, and for the first time, you sat us down and you were like, all right, let's figure out your expenses, let's figure out your baseline, let's figure out where you want to go, and if there are little speed bumps during the course of that, you guys want to buy a house, or you want to save in case for a rainy day, or whatever it may be, or in case another pandemic hits, right? That we can kind of come up with a game plan so that it's not so much of a shock and awe. And hopefully if there's something like this that happens, we don't have to move across the country again.
That's interesting. And I'm wondering if you could take me back to of like what that feeling is like in terms of, I'm sure obviously moving the family across country, kind of going into the unknown and the unknowable, to use a CrossFit phrase. But you made a comment there about already kind of having a financial advisor at that time, but being kind of unsure. And what that makes me think of is, in any environment, right? But even certainly currently, you can't turn on the TV right now or read a newspaper without hearing something, for example, about inflation or COVID and its potential effect on the economy and the markets, or one of the many other things out there that are plaguing or potentially causing the end of the world as we know it in terms of the economy. And I don't mean to make a joke of that, but it is a lot of noise out there. And I try to put myself in the shoes of the individual investor. And let's use you for an example in terms of going back that time with everything going on around you, in terms of forgetting about the personal things about moving across country, but then having to make a decision about your finances in the middle of shutdown in the economy and hearing things from all different directions. What's that like?
So I think, being a new mom of two, and with all of the uncertainties that the pandemic brought, right, it forced us all to wear multiple hats, right? We were homeschooling our kids, we're working from home, we're learning a new way how to work, right? Like we had to switch over our business entirely to like an online platform and figure out all the back end stuff of that.
Sure.
So there's a lot of learning, there's a lot of new. And I think what happens a lot of times is when you get so hung up in just trying to do and wear so many hats, you try to do everything, right?
Mm-hmm.
And when you look at something like finances and your future and retirement and kids' college funds and what to do with my savings, and I want to buy a house, is that even possible right now? Which is so overwhelming when you don't know when you're going to be able to reopen your business and things like that. I think what happens is like all of that noise gets even louder because you don't even really know where to start and how to really dumb it all down and start with the basics. And that's really and truly, it's the same thing with fitness, right? You can join a Bally's, you can join all these 3,000 online app things. And there is nothing that replaces a real life person, a real life coach to give you tactile cues to talk to you personally. Everyone's circumstances with this whole pandemic has been so different. Everyone has been affected in much different ways than the guy next door. And it's the same thing when a client walks into my door, or a new mother or a pregnant mother that I do pre and postnatal programming for. It totally depends what her background was with exercise. It does depend on where she's at right now, what type of injury she's recovering from, what type of birth and postpartum she's had. And all of these are major factors into your finances too, And so I think for us, that was super beneficial, is you forget that you don't have to do it all, as long as you have someone that you trust and that can guide you of how to put one foot in front of the other and talk to you personally about your process, where you are and how you want to grow to become financially fit.
Right. I love it. I love it. And that makes me think of, no, you make a good point there, because it makes me think of some things that, from my seat in the financial industry and being in the industry for a long time, something I say to folks all the time is that, well, look, despite all the tough times that we've had historically in the markets, you take the average return of the market, including all those bad times and the good times, and the market has chugged along at about a 10% rate of return over longer periods of time. So very easy to say, right? Very easy to say to someone, but I get it. It's in the same way as when you're coaching an athlete or coaching somebody postpartum, what the end result is if they follow your advice, but that's not it. It's not about just telling them, it's about taking them through the process at a speed that makes sense so that they can do their best to kind of clear out all that noise that's hitting them from every direction and actually make decisions that are ultimately going to be in their best interest. And, I think that that's what we really feel comfortable doing with our investment and planning policy statement that we take our clients through, right? You went through it. Many of our clients go through that where, before we even get to the investing part, which is really can hit people in a really complex way because of everything that they hear out there. We avoid getting there first, right? And we focus on really 5 major things when it comes to getting to know our clients, our new clients, and helping them become comfortable with the process. And you mentioned the first step a minute ago. It's the baseline, right? It's figuring out where you are today. How much money are you spending? What does it cost to run your lifestyle? So that's so. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, and that's one thing interesting too, that like we've had people come into our gym and they were like, well, I want to join, but I have to get in shape before I start.
Right.
And like, as silly as that sounded in my world of fitness, because I'm just like, no, you come here and we show you how to start so that you can
Right.
figure out how to grow, so that you're not wasting time the next 2 months doing what you're always doing, which is what put you in here anyway, because you're not
Right.
seeing results. But that was my mindset too. I was like, oh, well, I can't start this financial journey yet because I have to have this much in the bank, or I have to have, but that's not the case. It's like, just where are you at right now?
That's right.
Just, that's it.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
starting now.
Exactly. Let's not worry about sprinting to the marathon, right?
Yeah.
In another way of saying it, let's get started. Let's get started. Let's take small steps, the whole 1% rule, and let's take our steps at the speed that we need to take them so that that end result that as a coach and I know as a financial coach is achieved. But we need to make sure we take all the relevant steps along the way to make sure that our clients don't get overwhelmed. They don't get in a position where they're sabotaging their future finance because of something they may have heard. So understanding that baseline, understanding the steps that are involved, where you are today in terms of how much it costs to cover all of your expenses, your lifestyle. Number 2 is having a keen understanding of how much you actually have earmarked for that long-term goal. And when I say long-term goal, the common one, even though there are certainly others that many clients have, the major one usually is retirement and having enough money accumulated for that eventual retirement date. And knowing where you are today in terms of exactly what you're working with to get started. It's like you said, it's less about getting up to a certain point before you get started. It's more about let's understand what we have to do. And that's step 3, right? It's 1 and 2 are really baseline. Where am I? Step 3 is, okay, based upon those numbers, where do I need to get to in order to retire successfully and comfortably? In other words, how much money do I need to have saved by that retirement date in order to say, we can retire, we can live off the income from our portfolio comfortably, maybe legacy or impact, maybe paying for a portion of your grandchild's education, perhaps when you're long gone is a longer term objective. Those and some others are all factored in there, but we need to know that baseline, all of us collectively. We need to know what that number is in terms of capital sum that we need to have saved. And then 4 and 5 are where the rubber meets the road, right? It's like, okay, we've established a baseline. We have a goal out there in the future in terms of what we need to achieve. Then number 4 is we get our hands dirty, right? How do we get there? How do we make up that delta? How do we make up that difference? And it'd be interesting that we have the growth portfolio, the growth strategy, no bondcast coming up next week, because that's a really important element of Beck Bodie and how we invest money in our philosophy and on how we get there. That dives right into that topic really well. Then number 5, which is I find somewhat ignored in the financial industry, believe it or not, it's how do you stay there once you're there, right? So you've worked so hard, accumulated all this money, you've followed the steps, you've invested your money prudently, and now you're retiring. But hey, 62, I'm going to live another 30 years. At least one of, statistically speaking, a husband and wife retiring today, if they're age 62 in their early 60s, one of those spouses is statistically going to live until they're into their 90s. So that means that we're planning, you have to invest to accommodate a 3-decade plus retirement. 30 years is a long time. And so how do you stay there? How do you stay in a position of generating enough income to not only satisfy your lifestyle in year 1 of retirement, but make sure that portfolio is still satisfying your lifestyle 10 years from then and 15 years from then? Really, really important topics.
For sure.
So ask you, what do you think, the last time we spoke, asked the same question. You talk to a lot of people, they have questions about finance. What are some newer questions, or what are some questions perhaps that we didn't get to the last time we spoke that you think are like really important, that you hear perhaps a lot, or you think are really unique and important to that clients are asking?
Well, I think first and foremost, it's like when you see financial advisors and when you're trying to make a decision of like who to go with and why, I think like the biggest, like what is the biggest question that you should ask financial advisors? Like, what are you going to be doing with my money? Where are you going to be investing it? How are you going to be investing it? Because again, if it's a world that is foreign to you and you don't really know anything about, it's even sometimes hard and intimidating to even know what the right questions are to ask advisors with your money.
Yeah, no, great question. And there are actually a bunch of good questions to ask a potential financial advisor. But I think if I were to narrow it down to the top 3 questions, and you've heard these before. The first one is to get a good understanding is these 3 questions. And these questions are, what do you buy? So if I am basically taking all the money that I've accumulated and putting together a financial plan, and I am going to use you as a financial advisor to manage my money, I need you to be able to answer for me 3 things. What are you going to buy? When are you going to sell what you bought? And then when you do sell, where are you going to reinvest those proceeds? When you ask a financial advisor those questions, there should be no hesitation. There should be no dead space. There should be no or any kind of hesitation in their voice in terms of those answers, because this is your hard-earned money. Those questions should have really cold, concise, and most importantly, understandable answers, because this is something, we don't make things up as we go along in the investment world. Yes, the economy changes. Yes, the future, the one guarantee that we do have is tomorrow is going to be different from today, financially speaking. But the strategy that you apply to successfully manage money cannot change on a whim. It cannot change based upon something happening in the future in the economy. Who would have thought we would be facing in February of 2020 a pandemic that would eventually shut down the global economy for some time? Very easy to say, well, this time it's different. We're going to change our strategy altogether. But the fact of the matter is, whether it's a pandemic or any other consequence of what's going on in the world that's affecting the economy, the strategy, the philosophy that a financial advisor has towards making their clients money, putting their clients in a much, much better financial position tomorrow than they are today, cannot be arbitrary. So those 3 questions: what do you buy? When do you sell what you bought? And where do you reinvest the proceeds when you do sell something? The most important questions to ask a financial professional if you're interviewing someone.
And for me, when I first met you, I was in the boat of, I really don't have any idea of what questions to ask,
Mhm.
And because of it, we had invested, and it really, like I said, it had no arc, it had no path, it had no focus. But you had suggested a book to me called Dancing with the Analysts,
Add.
and that book really, I mean, it's a story, so it's a nice read. But I also thought, like, for someone who doesn't know anything about the markets or really understands them, how direct and how great of a job it really explains those three principles.
Sure.
And really made me start understanding the whole picture
Mhm.
with the market, and how to invest and why and things like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, no, and you're right, because what, like you said a moment ago, when you don't have a frame of reference necessarily, and that's not to say you didn't have a frame of reference, you had financial experience before, and you've dealt with money before, like many other folks have. But when it comes to like investing your hard-earned money, and look, the financial industry now is like a super Walmart of financial choices, right? I mean, there's a size and style and flavor for whatever it is you want to get into, from individual stocks to cryptocurrencies to mutual funds, what have you. But it's really important. I think, as you said, the book does a very good job of providing a frame of reference on what's out there. And I highly recommend anybody that is listening today or watching today, Facebook Live, what have you, send us a note at social@beckbodie.com, and we'll get a copy of the book out to you if you have interest in reading and learning more about gaining, so to speak, that frame of reference that we feel is so powerful in terms of putting yourself in a great financial position in the future. So I'm glad you brought that up, because I think that's an important element. And a book, a novel, right? It gives you a chance to learn at your own speed.
Yeah, it's a great baseline. It was a great baseline for me. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah.
S- I guess switching a little bit. So in investments, you always hear about, like, a lot of people investing in real estate and things like that. And right now it's a tricky time too, because there are certain areas that are just complete hotspots. I
Yeah.
know, like, the cost of living buying houses in Florida has skyrocketed. I think North and South Carolina, Vegas, they've skyrocketed. A lot of people coming down from New York or across from California.
Mm.
Do you think that real estate is possibly a good investment, bad investment, middle of the road investment? Where do you think, like, real estate is? Because I feel like right now it's so high that even if, I were to buy a house right now, and the market kind of is probably going to come down or taper down a little bit, it would probably take quite a bit of time to get back up to about the price, and then even more. I don't know. What is your advice on real estate markets
Sure.
versus investing with the stock market?
Sure. Yeah. So yeah. My advice on real estate is, I suppose, an identical thought that I would have had if you asked me, instead of real estate, what do you think about Apple stock over the next few months, considering, or another stock? It's that, in terms of performance and where I think it will go in the short term, I have no idea. Right? I mean, that's the cold hard truth, is that the economy and the markets, particularly in the short term, we feel are impossible to forecast. And that's really why the focus, as we talked about a moment ago, about what are the questions you should really ask and what are the most important ones. That's why those three questions are the most important, because what we have to do, my role as an advisor for our clients, is a tremendous responsibility, but it's also has to be grounded in a strategy that's sustainable, so that we're not making decisions on the fly. But these questions, by the way, what to buy, when to sell, where to reinvest, we have those answers beforehand, right? We have strict discipline criteria that we follow that answers those questions, where we identify companies when they hit a certain criteria. When a company fails to meet our criteria, we sell it from the portfolio, and then we reinvest those proceeds in a new company that has newly satisfied our criteria at that time. There's no news or anything else out there that happens that day that would cause us to divert from the strategy that we employ. So that's number one. But the more direct answer to real estate, I think, is that first and foremost, if we're talking about a primary residence, it really doesn't matter. You have to live somewhere. So whether that's buying a home or renting a home, you can make a solid argument for either direction. Particularly in environments where, we're seeing certainly, over the past year or so, a pretty big uptick in real estate. I would say real estate, folks tend to like real estate in the sense that it's real, right? It's a physical asset. You can reach out and touch it. My role for our long-term investors is to put them in front of, to give them the opportunity to achieve the full premium of the market, and whatever that full premium is going to be, let's say over the next 15 or 20 years. Historically speaking, like we mentioned at the beginning of this call, the stock market in terms of the S&P 500, that average has been about 10% per year, right? Things like real estate, bonds, fixed income, I said the word bond in the No Bond Cast, but things like that have been, when you factor in inflation, in some cases, depending on the asset class, equities, a diversified equity portfolio has been 3 times as much return as those other asset classes. So when I think about real estate as an investment, you gotta put it in context, but we need our clients to be in front of the full premium of what the market is going to produce over the long term. And there are real estate investment companies, REITs, publicly traded, that we have and do invest in as part of our equity portfolios. But going out there and buying a piece of real estate for an eventual return, unless you're a professional real estate investor, you have the capital and you can exercise leverage and you have that expertise, that's certainly a viable way. If you're somebody that's not experienced in real estate or doesn't have that experience or the capital to do that, I think there are much better means.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm. Any, we're bouncing up against
I
3:30.
think we're right at time too, yeah.
All right, excellent. But look, I'm sure there are other questions that you've gathered, but we'll have another one of these sometime very, very soon. But I just want to thank you for coming on again, and sharing your story once again with new listeners here. Want to remind everybody listening to the recast, so to speak, that if you want a copy of Dancing with the Analyst that Ashley mentioned before, reach out to social@beckbodie.com. Follow us at beckbodie on Instagram. Let's be on the lookout also for invitations and about next week's No Bond Cast. It's going to feature our growth strategies we mentioned, and really talk about that third piece that we mentioned in the investment planning policy statement. Once the rubber meets the road, how do you go from the money that you've accumulated today and really putting the right asset mix in place to achieve those long-term goals? So we're really excited about talking about that one next week. Thank you again, Ashley. I appreciate you coming on. Thank you for your time. Thank you for everybody watching and listening today. And we'll be back very soon.
And if anyone has any additional questions as to like how we started up, or just any questions about anything, I would be happy to link you to the right people and talk about my experience as well. So thank you so much for your time, Ben.